Your film, Blackfish, had a huge impact. It started this cultural conversation about our treatment of orcas and other animals. Why do you think it struck such a chord?
I think there were a lot of factors that caused it to, affect change, as we say. But I think the most potent ingredient was, after thinking about it for all these years, was that it was a shared story. So red states, blue states, socioeconomic differences, political proclivities, whatever, none of it mattered. Nobody wanted something bad to happen to an animal we love. And so we sort of locked arms and changed, policies, changed some behaviors, and stopped SeaWorld from doing those things.
Well, I want to share a trailer for The Grab with the audience here so they can get a sense of what the documentary is about.
I've covered stuff in the past that people told me I should be concerned about, that I should be watching my back.
I'm just gonna close the door here.
All right.
We're talking thousands and thousands.
This project has kept me up at night more than all of my other investigative reporting projects combined.
Every century is characterized by a key commodity.
And food is a very obvious and central way to wield power.
I came across this classified cable telling companies to go overseas and buy up food and water resources. And a lot of this is happening in the shadows, quietly.
Food has become much more powerful than oil.
How do you think that's going to end?
It's not just China, not just Russia. This is Wall Street, big money. It's leasing land to foreign countries. I thought maybe there might be more to it than that. Turns out there was.
I mean, it's like a who's who. It's like the MVPs of the mercenary world.
What if there's an uprising?
So that's where we come in.
Private military corporations.
One of the most notorious mercenaries on the planet. You have thousands of his emails.
Correct. That there was a piece of paper.
Right there was all of our names and passport numbers. They were definitely waiting for us. This is the part of the story that makes us think that all of our communications are hacked.
You just take and take and take, and pretty soon there isn't anything to take.
When you don't have enough food, money is useless.
While policy experts are debating, whoever has guns is going to go after it and get it.
He said I trust no one but myself right now.
We're getting kicked out.
How I went from food and water to invisibility cloaks. There's no bigger story that will impact more people than this story.
Yeah, oof, exactly. In case you weren't able to glean from the trailer, this documentary is about countries quietly buying up water and land rights. And the assumption might be that, well, this must all be happening overseas, but it's also happening here in the US. What conversations do you hope this documentary starts? What effect do you hope it has?
Yes, so it's a lot. I feel like with Blackfish, I sort of poked one dragon, and this is like every dragon had like baby grand dragons and great grandbaby.
You went full Game of Thrones on this one.
I went a little Khaleesi right there. This is, a different beast. It is, just as you said, this is a film about powerful entities grabbing up some of the final water and food resources out from underneath us, largely without us knowing it. Very scary and sounds kind of biblical, but I think that what I would love to have happen is for all the information from the investigation that we film here to allow us to frame water as the quintessential shared story of the 21st century. So in the same way that Blackfish was a shared story and that's sort of why it worked, wouldn't it be cool if we could transcend divisiveness and view water as essentially the shared story of our time?
When you talk about shared stories, another documentary that takes that same approach as Gasland. And it showed how fracking affects drinking water. When that documentary came out, it got pushback from the oil and gas industry. Those documentarians weren't allowed to cover congressional hearings. Are you experiencing any similar pushback?
So far, no. We've been pretty lucky. We are, however, looking at maneuvers by very powerful people. Some of them have engaged in very dangerous historical activities, and we have 20,000 emails from one of them, which fell off the back of the truck, as we say. So we're in some pretty deep waters here. But so far, nothing has happened. But I think we all just kind of consistently brace for impact, because the people who do those things do them in a cloak of secrecy, and they want those secrets to stay there.
We've heard for years that water is the new oil for the 21st century. And what this documentary does is connect the dots between water and our food supply. Explain more.
Exactly. So basically the grab, just to break it down, is a grab and kind of a mass scramble for food. What the investigation sort of led us to sort of deduce is that there is a lot of concern from nations, sovereign wealth funds, powerful elites, that they're not going to be able to feed their people. So there is a mass scramble for food, and that is essentially what Nate, our investigative reporter, who I follow through these years that we did this documentary, he discovered, one of the first things he discovered was China coming over and buying up ostensibly 1 in 4 American pigs. So they bought Smithfield Foods, and that effectively is them owning 1 in 4 American pigs. So he thought, that's interesting, kept investigating, and then found out that Saudi Arabia has also run out of water, just like China has. China does not have enough water to be able to feed its growing population, so it's looking elsewhere, hence the pigs. Saudi Arabia is the same. So they drain their aquifers, their ancient aquifers, and are now looking abroad for water, for food, for arable land, to be able to grow food, and they found some in Arizona. So Saudi Arabia is in Arizona, essentially draining an aquifer there, a fossil aquifer that does not get replaced in our lifetime, to be able to grow alfalfa to ship back to Saudi Arabia to feed their cows. So just a lot of concern, I think, around the globe. Some of it is above board, a lot of it is not.
There are many surprising moments in the documentary, but one of the moments that had me go, what? Russia is importing American cowboys.
The strangest fact, for sure.
What is it about?
It is very odd. Nate investigated this, and basically, Putin believes that climate change will be good for Russia. So what the thinking is that Siberia, once that melts, all that water creates arable land. You can grow alfalfa on that arable land, and basically Putin believes that this could be Russia's next biggest geopolitical tool, and that is to be the biggest beef exporter on the planet. So in order to kind of get that going, because they didn't really have a burgeoning cattle industry, they brought over American cowboys to teach them rodeos. I mean, like the whole romanticized version of like what it means to like cattle rear, great cattle grazing, all this stuff, in hopes that this is going to be their strongest geopolitical tool in the future, and that is being the biggest beef exporters on the planet.
You mentioned Nate Halverson with the Center for Investigative Reporting. You followed him across 7 years for this project. What was it like to watch as he uncovered, along with his team, layer after layer after layer?
It was exhausting. The dude is a bloodhound, human bloodhound. So it's the moment he thinks there's a there, he just doesn't stop. So, and there were a lot of theirs there. So we kept going as much as he would investigate, he would keep investigating, and I just sort of kept filming. And sometimes it's Sisyphean, right? You're just like, as reporters know, for every 100 phone calls, you might get one back. So it took quite a bit of time, and it was kind of a Russian doll, as he describes, of, peeling back the onion over 7 years and then finding out really kind of who's behind some of these maneuvers.
Like I said, there were a lot of eye-opening moments in the documentary, but is there one moment that really stays with you?
Yeah. Weirdly, it's a very small moment in the film. There is a thing we learned, and that is that President of China, Xi Jinping, ate raw pork when he was a little kid. And it was just this thing that just kind of caught in my throat when I heard that. You're just picturing this little boy who lived during the Great Famine. And just for those of you who don't know exactly, they're saying 60 million people, up to 60 million people died during this famine of starvation. So that's not 60 million people are hungry or a famine. They died. And this kid was probably surrounded by generations of other folks, possibly starving, possibly dying. I don't know, but, the sort of, I guess in my mind, it's almost like a childhood trauma being played out on the international stage. And there was something so just sad and human about that moment for me. It's so human and relatable to think that someone like that, who grew up like that and is now in charge of China, it's in his purview to never let that happen again, right? And so it sort of flipped the switch for me in thinking, oh my gosh, we can't force people into these desperate measures ever. And so we have to solve this for everyone.
Well, at the same time, what's fascinating is that some of this is being driven by Western dietary habits. The rest of the world is changing how they eat because of how we eat. How does that play into this?
It's huge. So the big headline for this, right, is that we have enough water. It's my favorite Nate quote in the entire documentary. There is enough water to grow enough food to have the calories to be able to sustain our population on the planet right now. Not just right now, but in 2050. When we have 9 billion people, when you have 10 billion people, we have enough. We just don't have enough to be able to grow enough food to eat in the ways that Americans eat and the Western world eats. Meat multiple times a day, 7 days a week. That's what's not sustainable. So it turns out we have the means, we're just not living within them.
There's a moment in the documentary when the team travels to Zambia. This is the African nation and one of the nations that's being affected by this water and land grab. And you get there and you never leave the airport because your names are on a list. The Zambian officials have been made aware that you're coming. And you're sitting there trying to figure out, are we going to make it out of here? Did you ever find out who was behind that?
We never found out. It's kind of the skillion-dollar question. We tried so hard. Nate, who can investigate anything, could not crack this one. We were told it was very high up in the Zambian officials, way above anybody's purview, that the person that made this final decision was way above everybody's pay grade. So there's that. But it's also, so we're thinking, how did they even know we were coming? And let alone what we were going to film, right? So the question is really who in Zambia had so much to lose or had something to lose that if we brought our cameras in and showed what they were doing there, they'd be in trouble. So that is a question that we never were able to get to the bottom of.
Yeah. It's a powerful piece of investigative journalism. I'm curious if it's made you think differently about the food on your plate or what's in your glass.
Definitely. Yes, it's changed me at a molecular DNA, whatever level, I think, in terms of just how we do life. There's a couple things that are exciting about it, and that is that there are solutions to all of this, right? Many of them I just told you about, eating less meat. 70 to 80% of the fresh water that's deployed for humans is deployed for food. And within that, meat is the highest water waster of all food. So just, that sounds negative, but if you turn that around and think to yourself, like, just by doing that differently, you will be moving the needle. Like, eating less meat means that you'll move the needle within the category that holds the most promise for the future. So that's pretty exciting. Like, you move the needle, you're moving it a lot by just doing that one thing differently. Food waste. We forced Kenya to dig up use up their water and grow whatever, avocados or watermelons so we can eat those things in December, right? And we want a ton of it, and then we throw away a third. So food waste is a big one. Regenerative agriculture, I mean, I could go on, there's so many solutions, but the big one I think for me is, can we galvanize together? Can we not make this yet another sort of divisive issue? Can this idea that water is a shared story transcend all of this divisiveness? Because our survival depends on it, and I think that if we, in my mind, if my happiness and my safety and my health is only good if you, at some sort of human agreed upon basic level, are also okay, like, what a cool way to do life.
Gabriela, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jen. Thank you.